so many with different issue, maybe some data, some network, some this, some that. So we're not going to be waiting for anybody. One fortunate thing is that there is going to be recording. You will be listening to it later. So we are starting immediately because we have another class, 3:30. Those of you that are in, please pay careful attention so that your aim and your purpose will not be eroded even as you have found your time and squeeze your time to be here. So today we have our teacher in the house also, who will be doing justice to this course, Sociology of Development. It's no other person than the one that we know, Mr. Gadoh Hussaini. So I'll leave the floor for him now to take over as we start immediately. You are welcome, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is my honor to be here again. This afternoon, we will be looking at some of the things we didn't do the other time. But if you remember last time we met, we talked about development, the entire concept of development. We were able to look at some of the features of development. We provided insights to some of the basic dimensions of development. Most importantly, we said development refers to process of improved condition of living politically, economically, and socially. And we said there is a difference between development and growth. Now, talk about development, we're talking about overall impact, overall improvement in the standard and quality of living in a society. However, when we talk about growth, it's simply an increase in the output, productive output, or increase in the numerical indices of a society. By increase, it could be increase of what you are producing in terms of your goods and services. By increase, you could also be talking about, by growth, we'll also be talking about increase in the population. But how do this reflect? How do you have this reflecting in the general society? If it is improving or it is reflecting on a positive note, then we'll be talking about development. Some of the scholarly definitions were given. But today, we're looking at the theories of development. The theories of development. And there are three basic theories to development. We have the modernization theory, the dependency theory, and the other one, which is not so much popular, the world system theory. The world system theory. So we'll start with the modernization theory. A quick note, the modernization theory is a theory that emerged after the Second World War. It is a theory by basically European scholars. And we have people like Smelser, people like Rostow, who have made immense contribution to the theory. And their position in respect to this theory is simply like the word entails, modernization. Now, why this theory emerged is because of the issues surrounding the society at the time of the end of the Second World War. We find out at the end of the Second World War, America was one of the major societies at the time. In fact, most of the European societies were collapsing, or were still suffering from the effect and impact of the war. We had even the Russian society also trying to expand its tentacles to other parts of the world. One major aspect of this theory is the contribution of the works and inputs of the Marshall Plan, which was aimed at the reconstruction of societies as at then. Now, the entire ideology behind it are very simple. Now, the modernization theory posits that nations of the world, the theory posits that development is a process. This process of development is about adopting modern measures, adopting processes as obtainable in the Western societies. The theory simply holds that societies of Europe and America are the most developed societies, particularly that these societies are modern. They have the basic structures. They have the basic features of what a developed society should look like. In fact, they are looking at it politically, economically, and socially. And they are believing that in the developed or in the modern world, political structure is stratified. Political functions are defined. You have a society where people know what to do. Government is all about delivering services as expected. And in the democratic society or in the modern world, democracy is the order of the day. It is the governance system. They are also looking at it economically. Now, on the basis of modernization, societies must have adopted technologies that will aid production. And this to say, other societies that are driving towards development must adopt industrialization. That is to say, industries would be established and all forms of production would be ventured into. Now, it is in the light of this that they have posited that development or nations striving for development must adopt the Western way of life. Now, this is the ideal system towards development. In fact, the theory is considered to be Eurocentric or American-centered because it only looks at the Western society as the ideal process for development. Now, they are also believing that in the drive for development, nations that have just emerged from colonialism, nations that have just emerged from the struggles of the colonial bondage need to adopt these ways and these processes. And so everything that they need to do, they have to embark on massive technological drive. They must embark on massive educational drive. They must embark on massive political orientation and political re-strategization. They must also embark on massive social orientation. So what we are to do is simply to adopt in totality the way of life as obtainable in America, the way of life as obtainable in other European societies. So it's more like a copy and paste process. We bring it and add it to our own. So the basic assumption of this theory are simply that modernization is a homogenizing process. Homogenizing process. That is to say, it is an all-encompassing process that seeks to create homogeneity, integration politically, integration economically, integration socially. The theory is also believing that in the drive for development, nations must always emphasize the fact that they are adopting the Western way of life, which is European-centered. Another major assumption is that development is a continuous process. While you're adopting this method, while you're adopting the Western way of life, you must take into effect, you must take into recognition the fact that it is a continuous process. You have adopted today, if we decide today to adopt the democratic processes as obtainable in America, which is modernization. Now, America decided that democracy, and earlier on, they were into ballot voting. Now, this theory will simply put, today, America have left ballot voting process. They are now talking about electronic voting. They now have electoral college processes. Now, as a process of continuity, we now should have evolved from just mere democracy that has to do with ballot box voting process. We should now have evolved to adopting electronic voting system. We should now have evolved in terms of our social life. We should now have evolved to adopting the prescription they have made to us. And what is that prescription? The prescription of gay or homosexual marriages, which is a major dictation today that some countries in Africa are facing, because they have seen it today that it is no longer obtainable or sustainable for a man and woman. Today they are adopting a process where they are talking about man and woman. Man, woman. As a modernization process, the prescription is simply that now we have adopted it. Now let's adopt man, and woman. Now, in the light of this, that was why the American government or the Western society have consistently pressured societies in Africa to adopt this measure. Because in our drive for development, and so they look at us as backward. Societies that have not adopted the homosexual marriages are societies that are backward. So we are now denying freedom. That is what they call it, freedom. Because in our drive for development, this is what we should now be adopting. So the essentials of modernization process or modernization theory is simply that nations of the world must adopt the Western way of life in all its forms and in all its vicissitudes. Anyhow we see it, let's adopt it. Because this is the way to development. Now, one major aspect of this is that there is a strand of the development theory, of the modernization theory. And this strand is a strand by Rostow. Is a strand by Rostow. And Rostow identified 5 major, in his own theory, or stages of development. He identified 5 major stages of development. And what are these stages? We have the traditional stage. We have the takeoff stage. And while we have this traditional stage, we have the takeoff stage, and then we have the maturity stage, and then, we have the takeoff, we have the precondition. Traditional, precondition, takeoff, maturity, and stage of high consumption. I repeat, according to Rostow, in his stages of development, he identified 5 major stages. The traditional stage, the precondition for takeoff. That is the stage for taking off. Then you have the major one, which is the stage of takeoff, and the maturity stage and the stage of high consumption. The traditional stage is a stage in which most societies are. Just like you have a child from infancy, the child has not yet started walking. What the child will be doing is that the child is still doing things, does not know anything around. The traditional stage is believing that societies at this stage have not risen. They are still at the medieval era. They are still at the stage of crude technology. And so, as much as they are gaining momentum to move to the next stage, which is the precondition for takeoff. Now, the preconditions for takeoff is the stage when the child starts crawling. The child starts crawling, starts trying to, gain his stance in respect to crawling. Now, in this stage, the precondition for takeoff, here the nations or societies are beginning to gain the awareness. Awareness, it is the major factor in the precondition stage. The people are beginning to be exposed. And so wanting to adopt ideologies, wanting to adopt technologies, wanting to adopt processes that would necessitate their emergence. So that is the stage of crawling. Now, the other stage is the stage of takeoff. At this stage of takeoff, it simply said that the society have now emerged. The baby that was crawling some time ago have now started taking steps. It's now walking. It's learning how to work. The child is walking. That is the takeoff stage. It is no longer the child who could not eat, who could not move. It is no longer the child that could not crawl. Now you're talking about a child that is already walking, taking steps. So societies at this stage have adopted the ideologies. They have adopted all the prescriptions towards development. Now, the other stage is the stage of maturity. Maturity. In other words, we'll now say that this child has become an adult. You say the boy of yesterday is a man today. That is the stage of maturity. Societies at this stage have assumed the potentials of becoming developed society. You have society at this stage that matured. They have basic healthcare facilities. They have organized political system and structure. They have organized social life. They have all that is necessary for a society to be called the developed society. So they can beat their shoulders and compete with developed societies of the world. Now, the last stage, according to Rostow, is the stage of high consumption. The stage of high consumption is simply stating that at this stage, societies have stabilized. They are now self-sufficient. They are producing massively industrial goods and are exporting to other societies. So at this stage, nations have reached their peak. So they can now be referred to as the civilized society. So we will now be talking about societies like America. You'll now be talking about societies like China. You'll now be talking about societies that have in excesses and can also give out. For instance, at this stage, you have societies like China. So much that China have reached this stage of high consumption, they have in surplus, they are producing in excesses, and they are selling and giving out. And that is why Nigeria can run to China wanting to collect loan, because they have and they can give out. But among all of these stages, where does Nigeria fit in, according to this theory? Well, you and I will better think of that much later. But what the emphasis of this all is simply putting is that modernization, the entire summary of it, except you are asked to discuss the modernization theory according to Rostow, then you'll be talking about the 5 stages. Else, the entire embodiment of the modernization theory is proposing that nations of the world, nations that are striving towards development, must adopt the Western ideology, the Western processes and Western ways of life, because these are the ways towards development. Now, what are some of the criticisms? This theory has generated some level of criticism, both in Africa and even in recent times, scholars have reason to criticize the theory. One of the major criticisms is that the theory is unilinear. The theory is unilinear in its view towards development. It is simply assuming that development can only be achieved when societies adopt in totality the Western way of life. So, not minding the differences in societies, not minding whatever that there is, but it is unidirectional, or you want to call it unilinear in its thought. Another major criticism is that the theory is Eurocentric. It is Eurocentric, and in some words, the theory is prejudistic. It fails, it's stereotypic. It fails to acknowledge African way of life, and somewhat looks at African societies or the less developed societies as backward. So unless you adopt the Western way of life, you are considered to be backward, according to this theory. But in its thoughts, this is just what it's assumed. So, by and large, another thing again about the theory is the theory simply looks at development simply on the basis that the prescriptions must be from the West, and there is no going back towards development. It simply puts that once a society is developed, there is no way the society is likely to fall short. And that is why it is simply emphasizing on the basis that society is a continuous process. Development is a continuous process. Yes, that is acceptable. But not to accept the fact that there's a likelihood of a one-time developed society falling short of falling from the developmental ladder, it is possible. But the theory does not accept that. And so you find that if we make reference to Nigeria in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s was assumed to be a society that was fast developing. In fact, Nigeria was ranked at the same ladder as having the same potential with Malaysia and Brazil. But today, while those societies have gone far ahead, ours have remained a story that is pitiable enough. We have fallen from the developmental ladder. The ranking, only we know where we belong in terms of developmental ranking. So this is simply all that there is, and possibly more, to the modernization theory of development. So development is simply a process of adopting the Western way of life. Like I said earlier, in case you are asked to now make reference to Rostow's 5 stages of development, then you'll be talking about the traditional stage, the precondition for takeoff stage, the takeoff stage, maturity stage, and the stage of higher consumption. Those are the 5 stages according to Rostow. And in Rostow's analysis, all the societies, developed societies, have gone through these stages. The America we make reference to have gone through this stage, these 5 stages. The societies of China have gone through these stages. So that is that in respect to this theory. Now we'll move down to the dependency theory. Now I want to particularly emphasize that the dependency theory is a theory that emerged in antagonism of the other theory, which is the modernization theory. The dependency theory is simply of the view, or let me rather say it was influenced by scholars from Africa and Latin America. Scholars from Africa and Latin America. And then you have scholars such as A.G. Andregunda Frank, who is often shortened as A.G. Frank. We have people such as Samir Amin, even the Walter Rodney of our own Africa is also a major proponent of this theory. Now, some other persons in this theory are people such as, what's his name? I can't recall, but let's move forward. The respect of this theory, the dependency theory, is a theory that simply tries to explain the underdevelopment of the third world societies. Underdevelopment of the third world societies, and possibly a prescription that was made by these scholars. Now, according to this theory, it is posited that the underdevelopment of Africa, some parts of Asia and Latin America, is as a result of the high dependency of these societies on the European and American societies. It is believed that the sort of relationship that have been established between African societies in particular and the Latin American societies is a parasitic relationship. A relationship where one society is depending on the other, but unfortunately, the other society is consistently sipping and sapping from the resources of the other society. So basically, through 3 stages, this type of relationship have been established. The era of colonialism, the era of neo-colonialism, which is the current era. But most importantly, okay, we have the era of slavery, colonialism, and neo-colonialism. This relationship has been established. In the era of slavery, a relationship that was detrimental to these societies were established. They came, and our people engaged in transactions of human as commodity in exchange for things like mirror, gin, gunpowders, etc. And in this light, more than 70 million Africans were given in exchange for commodities that were of no value. A relationship was established. While, according to Rodney, while this relationship was established, it is the able-bodied men and women that were taken from Africa that laid the foundation for the industrial development of Europe and America, because they had to work on the plantations in these societies. the relationship was established. During the colonial era, the relationship was further fostered in the sense that African societies became the metropolis for the repatriation of raw materials to societies of Europe and America. And so much so that in the process, all that were taken laid the foundation for our own underdevelopment. And Rodney would say that the roads that were created or constructed led only from the point of harvest to the point of repatriation. In other words, roads were constructed only led from the farm or from the mine or from whatever field to the ocean, where they were taken to Europe and America to boost production. Also, the systems that were adopted politically and socially were systems that only sought to keep us stagnant, if not backward, at their own expense. In fact, it was during the colonial era that cash food crops was substituted for the production of cash crops, which African societies knew almost nothing about. And so we have African societies that were forced into the production of cocoa and rubber, not minding what it was used for. Similarly, within this period, you will find that Africans were forced, farmers were forced to take loans from banks established by the colonialists. And the essence of this loan, the indigenous farmers were forced to take these loans and their land were used as collateral. And so Mobutu Siseko or former Zaire will say that I was told to save and I was made to save, but I had no access to the money as my money was sent to overseas. And so the interest that they claim, the African farmers did not get. The profit on the loan was simply the interest on the loan was for the metropolitan states. And in essence, people who could not So this is simply putting across to us is the fact that in the neo-colonial era, what African societies have gotten are simply flag independence. Flag independence that mean almost nothing. As we have continued with this form of parasitic relationship, so we still have African societies depending on the Western society for policies, depending on their approval on issues. And so when it comes to African societies wanting to have a say, their rights are limited. Look at the UN Security Council. And in the words of Patrick Lumumba, he would say, Professor Patrick Lumumba, he would say that when they call for meeting, they call us for meeting over there. And sometimes this GA meeting. And we go for a meeting where in countries and societies whose GDP are more than our own. A state, and he made reference to a state like Los Angeles, whose GDP is more than some countries in Africa. So you find that we sign bilateral relationship, bilateral trade agreements that are at our own detriment. Look at what Nigeria has gone into, the trade relationship between Nigeria and China. We go in to take loan, but the essence of the loan is that the Chinese government, through their Chinese Bank of Infrastructure, does not give you money. What they do is that they supply and they construct what you need to the tune of what you want. And then what they do is that they send their people from China because they are looking for where to give work. And they send them here to do the work. And our own people are shortchanged. Yet we get to pay the debts owed these societies. So the relationship that we have established over the years in the neo-colonial era particularly relationships that are detrimental. Through the appendages of IMF, World Bank, and World Trade Organization, we have been subscribed to policies that are at our own detriment. Look at what we introduced earlier on, SAB, structural adjustment, in the early 1980s. And so we have continued to bear the burden. And so they tell us to devaluate our, deregulate. They tell us to engage in privatization. And sometimes they tell us that these things are beautiful, we need to do it. And our leaders, without any form of thought and recourse, will just adopt it, not minding to whose detriment it is. So you find that these are some of the issues that this theory is simply putting across. But what is the theory basic? What is the basic assumption? That through the basic channels of relationship that we have established, we have succeeded in creating a relationship that is at our own detriment. And so you have African societies not benefiting from the relationship. And so they are prescribing that if Africa must develop, or if the least developed societies must attain some level of development at all, there is a need for these societies to break out from this relationship. We need to cut off from this parasitic relationship we have established with the Western world. Until we do so, then we are likely not to attain development. This is the tenet of the dependency theory, simply stating that we have depended so much on the Western societies. We seek their approval for everything. And so this relationship is to our own detriment. And the relationship dates back to the era of slavery, colonial era, and the neo-colonial era that has created globalization. Summarily, this theory has been criticized by so many scholars. And so some of the scholars are stating that African societies or the dependency scholars have failed to acknowledge the internal factors to the underdevelopment of the third world societies. And what are these internal factors? These are factors such as corruption, bad leadership, failed followership system, mismanagement, poor implementation of policies, and etc. That it is the internal factors, as much as that the entire blame for underdevelopment of third world societies have simply been shifted on the Western societies without acknowledging the internal factors to underdevelopment. And so when Walter Rodney was writing his book, he talked about how Europe underdeveloped Africa, not minding how Africans have underdeveloped Africans, or how citizens of the third world societies have necessitated and championed their own underdevelopment. Another issue or criticism of the dependency theory is that the theory also failed to acknowledge the fact that development is not just about cutting off relationship. It is also about adopting policies that are practicable. And according to George Aite of Ghana, Professor George Aite of Ghana, he stated that one of the major undoing of the dependency scholar is the fact that they have failed in their bid and have consistently blamed the Western societies without acknowledging the internal issues. And so when they talk about cutting off relationship without also understanding that there are certain basic factors that could be adopted. There are policies that have been adopted in Europe and America, and these policies are working. But when you bring those policies here, it doesn't work because of our own internal issues. So these are some of the issues in respect to the dependency theory. So, and the last one we want to go into is the world system theory. The world system theory. Please, Cosgrave, I beg to attend to this text message, please. I'm coming.
Godwin Onoja, good afternoon. Onoja Godwin, can you unmute yourself, please?
Yes, good afternoon, sir. Just joined the class not too long.
Yes, but are you doing this development?
Huh?
Are you sure you are offering this development? This
Okay, it's not this one, but I thought it's the elective that we are offering.
No. This is how that second one. That theoretical issue in development.
Okay, that's the one I'm offering.
Even Salah too.
Okay.
Even Salah, same thing. Godwin, sure you are in criminology, right?
Yes.
I know it's not this one you are offering. It's the theoretical issue.
Okay.
Salah, can you unmute yourself, please?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Paul,
Good afternoon.
good afternoon. How are you?
I am fine. How are you doing today?
Fine, I'm fine. I'm offering this one. Oh.
No, Alan. I share your own. You are pure development, right?
Yes, development, yes.
Now, yeah, here is your house. I know.
Okay.
You are back, Abby?
No, I'll be back tomorrow.
Tomorrow from Casina?
No, not from Casina. I went to Jos again.
Hey, no be smart, you know. What is
I
happening?
lost my aunt. I lost my grandma.
Sorry, yeah.
Hey, yeah, yes.
Okay, so you are coming back to Abuja tomorrow?
Yes, I'm coming back tomorrow. I'll be in school. I was in school on Wednesday, Thursday.
But did I see you?
No, I don't have lectures, so I just went to do my registration.
You have called me now.
I heard you are busy. You had lectures then.
Eh? Hey.
All right. Sorry, I had to take that.
So let's
All right. Yes, we can continue. The word system theory is simply a theory that was majorly propounded or influenced by Immanuel Wallenstein. Immanuel Wallenstein, in his theoretical position, tried to create a balance between the dependency and the modernization theory. And in fact, it is this theory that has greatly influenced the globalization theory to a major extent. And so it is looking at the relationship that exists between societies of the developing societies and the developed societies. The theory is simply putting across the fact that the developmental drive of societies is such that have always been there. And so you have relationship between the core and the periphery. And in between, there is the semi-periphery. And the core and the periphery, just like you have it. Sometimes you have a society that is deep, and then you have the other one that are at the receiving end. Now, according to this theory, the major position of this theory, simply put, that there is a strong link between most disciplines. And disciplines between sociology, psychology, economics, etc., and all of these across the world are centered on development. However, that is just on the one side of the position of the theory. The major end of the theory is the fact that this theory is simply putting that in the drive for development, relationships that have existed are such that between societies that have the resources and societies that have the technologies. And so in the context of this, you have Nigeria having crude oil, but not having the machineries for refining. So what we do is that we sell in the international market, and then when we have the need, and then we buy from them. A relationship has already been embedded. And this relationship is such that the whole world is geared towards relationship, and no society can claim to be on its own. No society is an island. And in the drive towards this, most societies are aiming towards capitalism as a global system and as a global practice. Therefore, the relationship that exists has already been so buttressed by the global practice of capitalism. Again, you have a system in which the Bretton Woods institution of IMF, World Bank, and World Trade Organization have so much become the major tool for incorporating societies and nations, policies being channeled from these institutions. And so why do we talk about devaluation? Why do we talk about the dollarization of the world economy? Dollar today is the world #1 currency. So in Nigeria here, we cannot trade overseas without talking about the dollar. In fact, it is said that there are some Nigerians who are even earning in dollars, and so would rather not earn in naira. One of such was said to be the now DG of CEO, World Trade Organization, Okonjo Iweala. It was even reported that she was earning in dollar, not in naira. Why is this so? Because the world operates more as a system. It is a web of relationship. And this web of relationship exists particularly between the core and the periphery, where we are at the receiving end of whatever it is. They depend on us for raw materials. We depend on them for the machines. They depend on us for one or two. We depend on them on this and that. So there is a web and network of relationship. The deeper perspective of this theory is that the theory is simply an enclosure. It's simply a theory that is based on an enclosed explanation, because it simply centers on just the core, the periphery, and all.
Yeah.
So when we talk about the issue of global economic depression, it was not just a thing that affected one society. It was a thing that affected other societies. What is obtainable in America, if America starts experiencing global crunch, it also affects us. If they also have issues, it also affects us. So the world operates in a way that the issues of societies are interdependent. So this is just that. But however, one of the major criticisms of the theory is such that the theory is mostly, Wallenstein was accused of justifying the issues, the relationship, the sort of relationship that exists between the third world societies and the Western society, because he is simply putting across the issues that these societies operate and this relationship is prehistoric, and so cannot just be done away with. And also, it is simply justifying the fact that issues that affect us affect them, issues that affect them affect us, which basically cannot necessarily be true. And so we find that in relationship, in fact, that is where the dependency scholars have often accused this theory of trying to justify the sort of relationship they have established over the years. So this is this in respect to the theories. The other one that is just by the way is more like the globalization theory, that simply has its roots in the world system theory. So, any questions so far? Yes.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. My question is this. We have to start with modernization.
I can hear you, sir.
Okay, can you now?
Okay, I can hear you now. That is like an
You remove
interference.
I think is along this strand.
Okay.
For example, when you started from
Hello. There's a whoo sound at the background, like an interference, a wave.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes. Hi. I can hear you again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I said my question is around these strands.
Okay.
Like from where you started from modernization theory. What are the other strands of the theory? Because the only place you mention strand is when you were talking about Rosto, you said the 5 stages. Then what are the other strands of modernization? What are the other other postponement of modernization that form the strand?
Okay, you're talking about other proponents of the modernization theory.
Yeah, because the strand is talking about the different type of maybe a type of I think different people that talk about modernization differently. I think that is what the word strand means. So
yes.
What are those other? Because when you talk about Marxism now, you have different people like neo-Marxists, like Orthodox Marxists, like Frankfurt schools. Then when you come to the modernization now, what are the other strands of because even categorically, Dr. Kali says that anything that has to do with theory, we have to master the strands. There are about 5 different points he mentioned for us. After the introduction, the analysis, the major view of the theory, then what is the strands, then the applications, before we move to a suggestion and commendation and all of that. So I want to be soaked with this strand in each of the theories.
Okay. Now, according to Smelser had his own perspective towards that. Smelser. Okay. Yeah, according to Smelser was looking at modernization as on the basis that, according to, let me quote, he says, in Smelser's analysis of modernization, he said, modern societies have particular feature of social structural differentiation. They have particular feature. If you want to know a modernized society, there are basic feature. And what is this feature? The feature is in defined political and social rules. Defined political and social rules, according to Smelser. That you have institutions in the state, in the society, in Smelser's analysis, that there are institutions in a modernized society are defined, which perform this. And the social settings as well, social institutions like the family, even in terms of our socio-cultural origin, they have clearly defined roles. Today, in England, you have the political and the monarchical system. Whether we like it or not, the function of the Queen of England is defined. It is not on every situation. In fact, you hardly hear interference on issues. The same way when it comes to the parliamentarians, their issues are defined. It is not on every capacity you find them talking. So Smelser was simply emphasizing that one of the major features of developed society is that there are social-cultural differentiation, social structural differentiation. Issues of societies are clearly defined. Now, There are other people who made certain contribution, and this is basically a summary of it all. And so if you want to begin to now pick them one after another, then we will now have to look at some other issues. But I want to pick one, according to Coleman rather. Coleman also had a contribution. And according to Coleman, he said that modernized societies have three major features. Modernized societies have three major features. One, differentiation in political structure. Two, secularization of political culture. Secularization of political culture. And three, enhanced capacity of political system. One, I said differentiation of political structure. What do we don't talk about differentiation according to Coleman here? What the parliamentarians will do is different from what the executive will do. We have the arms of government. I mean, the tiers of government, the legislature, the states, federal, and local government. Everything is structurally defined. Again, when we talk about secularization of political culture, you're talking about political culture being practiced in line with equality. Political culture being practiced across board. Every society should have a system in which the political awareness and in which the political education is spread. It is not a sin of certain people being apolitical. It is a system of consciousness. If you look at it down in this part, you find that we have more people being apolitical. In fact, some people's political culture are based on sentiment. So they end up whipping sentiments all across board. So secularization, it shouldn't be something that is conscripted. It should be something that should be everywhere. The political culture and consciousness should be everywhere. And this culture should be based on the ethics and of political practice. And then we talk about the last one, according to Coleman, which is enhanced capacity. We must groom our political culture. We must groom our political practice. Let it not be a political culture that was obtainable in the 1980s, is the same political culture that we are having today. No. We must continue to improve on our political systems. In 2021, we are still talking about ballot box. We have not enhanced, we have not developed. We have not been innovative enough in advancing our political drive. So you find that our political systems and structure must be enhanced. We must continue to build on these things, not remain dormant because of our crooked and selfish reasons. We must continue to evolve. So in 21st century Nigeria, somebody somewhere is waking up in the morning because because his tweet was deleted and is talking about suspending Twitter and not even talking about that, talking about prosecution. These are some of the issues. This is not democracy, as Coleman would have wanted us to have in terms of modernization. So this is one other part of it. So there are so many. So if we begin to now, there are so many. Each of these scholars that have contributed all have their views to it.
I think this is wonderful because since it's part of the main feature and main needs of our outline of our lecturer, is good to understand it better. At least you have been able to have analyzed three strands, and maybe some other time you can update it to 5. Nevertheless,
no problem.
So the second one now, which is dependency. Do we have? Can you still do something similar in terms of strands, position of different theories?
Okay. In terms of this dependency theory, in fact, one of the major theory. He was one of the major proponents. In fact, the theory is even more traced to the work of Rao, I think Presbych.
Rao
Presbych.
Okay.
Ralph Presbych was the then secretary of ECLAC. I think it is the Economic Council of Latin America countries, Economic Community of Latin American countries. And what Ralph Presbych was simply putting across was that he identified various things that must be done. And what was this major role of ECLAC, the Economic Community of Latin America countries? Their major role were simply to, one, develop monetary policies that could bring about the development of the Latin American countries, to promote the political effectiveness of the governance system in Latin America, and also to enhance the adoption of indigenous policies that are centered on the development of Latin America. There were about 8 of them. So it is this prescription by Rahu that gave rise to the works of other scholars. And some of these scholars have come up with their own. And we are talking about persons like Teodonio dos Santos. And that's one major. Enrique Cardoso also made certain positions clear. And according to Cardoso, let me take one of them, Foster. He mentioned 3 different issues. Now, please, Foster, or rather, let me talk about, sorry, you are bringing me to taking them one after another, which is not something I've always done. I try to just understand their work in all. So let me not give you something that is, give you quotations from, if I can't remember their quotation, I hardly take notes of quotations. So, but generally, my course rep, the emphasis is on the fact that they were talking about cutting off relationship. Everyone next with me, I'll pay attention to emphasis.
Okay, no problem.
Yes. Another one. I'm waiting.
Madam Chinwe.
Yes,
I hope you have. I know.
Yes, because
you need to. I know you wanted to ask.
Yes, I have a question. In fact, I want you to just clarify some issues on the world system theory. When he was talking about the core and the periphery, my network wasn't stable, so I want to get that is what he was actually saying. I didn't really get it. Thank you.
Okay. Now, according to Wallenstein identified the fact that the world system theory is a theory that is basically centered on the core and the periphery. And the core and the periphery is a relationship between the society that has the resources and a society that has the technology to process. Wallenstein identified the fact that the capitalist world economic system survives on this relationship. And this is a relationship that justifies dependency. The core society are the societies or the innate societies where development gets its drives from. The peripheral societies are the societies at the surface. Usually, you have the semi-periphery, you have the periphery, and then you have the core. You have the periphery, semi-periphery, and then you have the core. The distinction between these societies is that there are societies that have these raw materials. There are some that have not, in the course of having these raw materials, have been able to advance development. But there are others who have been able to attain the development and are able to process. Let me give you, for instance, the core society are the societies that are the most advanced, if I am still correct, before I interchange them. The semi-periphery are those who have not attained the required level. And then you have the periphery, those who are still at the surface. Theirs is still at the surface. So, in essence, this relationship has been embodied in such a way that societies like China, societies like Japan, societies like South Korea have moved beyond the societies that can be regarded as not being developed. I won't talk about China. My major emphasis is on the Asian tiger, which is, and we're talking about Hong Kong. I'm talking about Hong Kong here. Now, these societies have moved beyond the societies that we can now regard them as they are not developed or least developed. No, they are in between. So they have attained the level of being regarded as developed societies. There are some who have attained the actual sense of development, and these are the European societies of Germany. They are the dictators. They are the G8 or G7 countries, if we want to regard them in the modern day realities. So economic-wise, they are there. Political-wise, they are there. Social-wise, they are there. But the periphery countries are the countries that are still wanting to rise. They do not have the capacity, but they are emerging. So they are just there at the surface. And there are some who are in between, and there are some who are just deep there. So this is the distinction. Now, in essence, it is simply putting that societies of the world have survived on this nature of relationship between all societies. All societies. It is a world system form of relationship that nations have come to depend. It is simply justifying the essence of dependency. And this is why the dependency scholars do not find it as a theory worth embracing, because they see it as a justification of the dependent relationship that exists. So in this light, you have societies exercising some form of manufacturing imperialism, in the sense that they take resources from us, our raw material, and then extract, do all the things, and then we still go to buy from them. Take, for example, in Nigeria, we have Shell, even though they are leaving, Ajib Mobile, etc. in Nigeria. And what do? They take our crude oil, even though it is by concession, we are selling it. And Nigeria today, sometimes we boast to getting 2 million barrels per day. And then we take this into the international market because we do not have the needed machineries. And what do we do in this regard? We majorly they now process. We have sold it to them, and then we now go to buy from them. Simply put, our case is like a farmer who does not have mortar, but wants to eat pounded yam. So what he or she does is that he sells the yam, and then because this person have mortar to pound, and then you now go back to eat pounded yam because that person has mortar and knows how to pound. And this is how it works. This is how the relationship between the farmer and the pounded yam seller or the person in the restaurant works. And that is how the relationship between the least developed countries and the most developed countries in the world. Any question?
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Yes.
Okay. My question is, this relationship has been on for a very long time, and everybody knows that it has not been favorable. But there is no attempt to get out of it. So what exactly is the issue?
What exactly is the issue? Is what the globalization thinkers or proponents of the globalization theory would want to tell us. Now, according to the globalization theorists, and what do we talk about globalization? Globalization is simply a web of relationship. Globalization is a web of relationship, a system or situation where countries are connected. And so when we talk about globalization, we are talking about diffusion of culture, diffusion of political ideals, diffusion of every form of civilities. So what you find in Nigeria, you find there. Today, the whole world, you can travel to any country. Nations are establishing embassies in every other countries, so we can make traveling easier. The globalization theories are of the view that globalization as a system has come to stay. And it derives, like I said, it is similar to the world system theory. But the only difference is that the world system theory acknowledges that there is a distinction in societies. So there is a distinction, societies are divided between the core and the periphery. But some scholars will add semi-periphery. But whatever the case, the globalization thinkers, the world system theorists understand there is a distinction. But the globalization theorists are simply emphasizing on the fact that these societies have come, in fact, we have created a network of relationships that we cannot differentiate. Everybody is seeking the diffusion of culture. The things you find in Ghana, you find in Nigeria. The things you find in Nigeria, you find elsewhere. Nigerians are establishing Nigerian restaurants in UK. So you can go to UK and not worry about eating grasses and vegetables, because you can still go to Nigerian restaurant there and eat your pounded yam and fufu. So cultures are spreading. Now, why we know these things are bad, we know some of these things are at our own detriment, why are we not breaking out of it? The point is this: breaking out of this relationship is not possible. It is not possible because whichever way, economically, politically, and socially, it has come to stay. Countries and nations are bound to relate. Look at capitalism. The only country not practicing capitalism in the world is Cuba. Cuba has remained a socialist country. And for 62 years, Cuba have been on economic embargo, has been placed on economic embargo by America. In other words, nobody buys from Cuba or sells to Cuba, except for some stubborn countries like Russia that have continued to align with Cuba, and some other people who are saying that there's the need to align, that the ideology in Cuba is good. And what is socialism in the Cuban sense? The Cuban sense of socialism is that, which was led by Fidel Castro and Raul Castro. They have pushed for that society. They have seen that we need to develop our society, a society for the people. Capitalism is all about profit making. And so in Cuba, healthcare is for everybody. It is only in Cuba that you cannot talk about illiteracy. Only in Cuba, you can't talk about illiteracy. Illiteracy is almost non-existent in Cuba because education is free to any level. It is in Cuba, every person in Cuba has an apartment to himself. It is in Cuba, healthcare is free to everybody. It is in Cuba that you talk about public transport system. Even though you get to pay a token so that the government can have some money to get. So when it comes about public transport, it is almost free, just a token that you pay. It is in Cuba that if you want to own a car, they make it like private car, they make it expensive. Why? Because that is a way of getting money to put into the economy. But in terms of tourism, people go to Cuba for tourism, and they make it so expensive so they can generate money. They don't sell anything. The sugarcane they get is there. But why are we saying, why is Cuba blacklisted? Cuba is blacklisted because it is identified as a country that seems not to be practicing capitalism. And that is why they are punishing Cuba for 62 years now. Leaders of the world, particularly in Africa, do not have the right, do not have the capacity to bear. And in fact, you and I in Africa, we cannot bear what Cuba has bought for 62 years. Imagine that no country is buying our oil. These are our leaders. They will not sacrifice their salary. So anything America says, they want to accept. Anything another country say, the next thing, if they tell us that they will not sell to us, we must not buy. We will start begging, please buy. The issue is that our leaders, even though these things are bad, do not want to cut ties from these Western societies because they have come to understand that these styles, it is more like self-enrichment. Kwame Nkrumah foresaw this thing, and he proposed for a United States of Africa, where Africa will be self-sufficient. Africans will depend on themselves and not depend on Western societies. Look at Gaddafi, how he was disgraced and eventually killed. Gaddafi did not depend on the West. He was so stubborn to the core that America was threatened. And anywhere there is oil, America behaves like a dog. Anywhere there is bone, the dog will want to look for that bone. America is like that. Anywhere there is oil, America wants to be there so they can take control. But Gaddafi insisted. He stood his ground. And look at what happened to Libya. Look at the state of the issues in Libya today. Look at Julius Nyerere when he proposed Ujamaa, African socialism in Tanzania. If African countries try to forge a system that is parallel to what is obtainable in the West, they will cut you short. They will, because they don't want it. You must align with the Western practice. And I tell you, time shall come. Today, we are still talking about homosexuality, and we have not accepted it. We are not embracing it. It is good. We are not embracing it. We are African. But I tell you, in times to come, since we have created a country that can borrow and borrow, our leaders will be told that if you don't legalize it, you will not be given money. In fact, they will do everything possible to pressure us. And when our leaders begin to take action, they will say it is oppression of human rights. Yes, these things are bad, but we have created a web of relationship, so much that these countries are now dependent on each other. Do I foresee a situation where we'll be independent of the Western influence? I don't foresee it. And we'll continue to be at their disposal. When they call us for meeting, we run to them for meetings. They don't come here. UN meetings have not been held here. No meeting has been held in Africa. It is we running there for anything, running to them for everything. They don't come to us for anything. They don't. We run to them. And that is why we cannot stop it. As long as you are a puppet to somebody, he will continue to dictate to you how to live your life. And that is the case with African societies. Any other question?
I think it's very well explanatory.
Okay. Any other one? All right. In the absence of any, we go to some of the development strategies as was obtainable. We are talking about the Marshall Plan and the Asian tiger, development strategy of the Asian tigers. The development strategy of the Asian tigers, in fact, when we talk about the Asian tigers, we're talking about countries such as, or societies such as Hong Kong, Japan, Singapore, Hong Kong, Japan, Singapore, and sometimes Taiwan is sometimes included, but I think there are more than that. There are basically 4 major, and sometimes they are called the 4 miracles, the 4 Asian miracles. Sometimes that's what they refer to them as, 4 Asian miracles. Why they refer to them as the 4 Asian miracles is that at the dawn of independence, these 4 countries, South Korea, yes, South Korea is the other one, South Korea. These 4 countries were nowhere. These are societies that were at the lowest level as every other society emerging from the evils of colonialism. They were at the ground level. And so we find that the issues that surrounded them were such that they understood their place in time. They understood that in years to come, there was the need for them to devise measures that will bring about development, strategies that would boost their future. Unlike Nigeria, that have abundance of fertile land, and we don't know what to use it for. These countries do not have fertile land. The only country that may have equated to Nigeria was Malaysia. And they said Malaysia even came, it is on record that Malaysia came to get palm fruit from Africa so they can also produce. Today, Malaysia is far ahead. We have abandoned the cultivation of palm oil. So Malaysia today is leading in terms of export and sale of crude oil, while Nigeria is lost out of the radar. Why is that so? What is the difference between what did these countries do right that have earned them development as they have had? Let's not forget Singapore. Singapore, one of their major figure or champion of their development was their earliest leader. I think is it Lee Yu Kim or Lee Yu Kwam or so, was one man who foresaw the future of Singapore long before every other one could conceive it. In South Korea, the story was not different. So some of the issues about their development that has become a wonder to many, and many development scholars have come to call it Asian miracle, is the fact that they adopted various measures. And one of these measures, number one of the issues or factors that led to their advancement is visionary leadership. Visionary leadership. They had leaders that were not selfish, leaders that understood the dimensions, the world we take long before we ever got there. Leaders that understood that they need to bury self-greed. Leaders that understood that they need to sacrifice today and lead so the people can develop. That was what happened. And today, they are far ahead. Our own Tokpa Aladi some time ago, I think he also went to Singapore on a study. He came and he was telling the stories of seeing how beautiful Singapore is. He said the educational system is out of here, out of this world. The structures are beautiful, are just nothing to write home about. So you find they are just far ahead. And this is a society that cannot boast of a fertile land. leadership. They are leaders led by example, not the ones that we have in Africa. They are leaders sacrificed, not the ones we are in Africa that we want the people to sacrifice. And so when we talk about no money for government to pay salary, it is mass retrenchment they are talking about, not about cutting down their own salaries. This is what was obtainable. They had visionary leadership. Another factor that led to the development or advancement in that society is the fact that they had pragmatic followership system. Pragmatic followership system. Not the kind of docile followers we have in Nigeria. Followers that are divided across religions and religion and ethnic lines. Followers that are self-centered even more than the elected or appointed leaders. I've always said in Nigeria, everybody is waiting for his or her own time to steal. Forget, it's easier for someone to sit by the corner and condemn when he is still at the other side. But when he gets there, the story changes. They change rank. And this is the case we have had. So in Africa, or in that part of the world rather, you find that their followers were able and active. Because the leader led by example, the people were able to follow. They demanded accountability when they needed to. But here, we don't. We have followers in Africa, particularly in Nigeria, who would rather not demand. And so when you talk, this one says he's a Muslim, you're attacking him because he's a Muslim or he's a Christian. You're attacking him because he's from my place. And that is why you find that in most cases in Africa, in Nigeria, when someone is being prosecuted, what do our people do? They print banner and flyer and they start going on the street in solidarity of someone that have looted your future. These are the kind of thing you are. You can't find such in such societies. You can't find such nonsense. And that is why they are far ahead. And most importantly, the adopted economic system. And what is that economic system that they adopted? They adopted export substitution strategy. They understood that as much as they needed to advance, they needed to attain development, there was the need to develop agriculture that will drive exports. They were not so dependent on foreign aid as we are today. They adopted measures so much that was aimed at exports. Lest I forget, this export substitution measure is one of the other factors that will come in when we talk about one of the other factors, which is the adoption of light industries. But here, they adopted export substitution measure in the sense that they kept producing they adopted mass production so they could boost exports. Look at Taiwan. We'll talk about Taiwan rice. Mass exports. We'll talk about technology. Mass exports. So what they did was export substitution of goods and services. So what they would do is to send people to go and study, come, and then mass produce whatever aspect of it that they need. And then they sell. They sell out. In Nigeria, our balance of trade is always imbalanced. We have more imports than we have exports, and it doesn't work that way. So they have more exports than they had imports. They were not importing as much as they were exporting. So they were able to gain, to get more, to acquire more. And that laid the foundation for their development. Another thing we must also look at is the adoption of light industries or industrialization in terms of light industries. They were able to adopt so many industries, particularly the production of copper, the production of different types of electronics, rods, ions, etc. And you soon find that they were even producing in quality so much that they were selling to other countries like Europe, like America and Europe. So this was able to boost them. Now, on the other part, another major system or issue that drove their development is their educational policy or educational system. You see why we have gotten it wrong from the beginning is the fact that our educational system is driven towards theory and not practice. All I have done here is sit here and talk and talk and talk. But that is not the case over there. It is more of practice. It is more of practical. At the early stage, children are taught how to produce. So we have people producing wristwatches. Children are taught right from primary and secondary how to produce this and that. You want to be a science student in Nigeria. You and I in sociology, we did, what do they call that course? We did science and society, which till today, I don't even know the relevance, even though, well, jack of all trades. But you find that over there is always a line of direction. If you want to be a medical doctor, you specialize. You want to be an engineer, you specialize. So much so that some of these things you and I buy in Nigeria are primary and secondary school projects over there. This is what they were able to do, and they got it right. Look at Japan. Japan is one of the leading producers of technology, all forms of electronics. Look at in South Korea. We're talking about Hyundai, which we call in Nigeria Hyundai. We're talking about LG. So many of these things. It is because they were able to get it right from the onset. Now, I beg to correct something. The other time I was talking about export substitution. It is not export substitution, import substitution. Import, that means you are substituting import substitution, not export substitution. I beg to correct that. Now, one other aspect of issue, or one other issues I want us to look at is, in terms of their development drive, is the fact that they were able to borrow technology. The kind of countries they had surrounding them, the kind of neighbor you have surrounding you can inspire you, and this was their case. They had countries, they had societies, they were surrounded by countries that were driven towards development. So in some cases, they end up learning. The competition was there. The competition to break out. Today, whether we like it or not, America is trying to still hold Hong Kong as part of its territory. Japan is bordered by China. And so China is thriving regardless of its population. Japan cannot be left behind. Singapore is bordered by countries that are attaining development. Singapore doesn't want to be left behind. The same with South Korea. Who is our neighbor? What countries are our neighbor? Talking about Niger, Benin Republic, Cameroon. No wonder we are not rising. The other day I saw a picture of a which is in Niger, just gutter separating us, and see how loosely it was. So the kind of neighboring societies they had was able to boost their development. So by and large, the development of these countries were inspired by factors that were inherent together, the Asian tigers or the Asian miracle. So these societies, Hong Kong, Japan, Singapore, South Korea, were societies that rose from the ashes. They had no resources. They had no available fertile land. They don't even have the population as much as Nigeria does. But today, they are forces to reckon with. What did they do right? Those are some of the things we mentioned. Visionary leadership, pragmatic followership system, establishment of light industry, indigenous educational system, import substitution and competition between and amongst neighboring societies through borrowed technology, etc. So, any other question?
I think if there is no question, you need to respond this and start.
Okay, you said something.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
There is no other question, then
Okay. Okay.
Since we are starting another course by 3:30 and it's at least it's not going to be fair for you to continue like that. So maybe just need for before the course by 3:30.
Okay. Okay, no problem. Thank you.